Okay, class, behind me we have two quadrilaterals we talked about last time, the parallelogram and the rectangle. We're going to take a look now at some of the properties that were similar and some of the properties that were different. So the first thing you'll note is that a parallelogram has opposite sides that are equal in length. Well, we proved that the other day that the rectangle also has opposite sides that are equal in length. So that is definitely a similar property, opposite sides being congruent. Well, let's look for some more things here. It also turns out that opposite angles on a parallelogram are congruent, and we could go through the proof of that using some diagonals and the information we have. But we did that in class, so we're going to save you a little time here and just talk about the properties. Opposite angles are in fact congruent. Now you'll note that I'm marking these different than I am on the rectangle. In the parallelogram, these are not all the same, right? So I have to say only the opposite ones, single arc to single arc, double to double. On a rectangle, of course opposite angles are equal to each other because they're all 90, so that makes sense as well. Now we'll get into some of the differences. One of the biggest differences is that the diagonals that we draw, I'm going to draw one in here for you, A to C, the diagonal A to C and the diagonal D to B, it turns out that these bisect each other. Well, we talk about bisectors in one of our proofs, but this and this have to match, and this to this have to match. Now you'll note that I marked them differently. I went from D to this point and B to this point. Those are the same. And then A to this point and then C to this point. Those are differently marked. It turns out in a parallelogram that they bisect each other, but those diagonals are not congruent to each other. This one would be shorter than that one is. But in a rectangle, if I draw those lines in, the diagonals in a rectangle, these are diagonals and they are congruent diagonals. So if a rectangle has congruent diagonals and they bisect each other, that means that these all actually would get the same markings. Alright, so they're bisectors and congruent to each other. That's one of the big differences. In the parallelogram, they bisect, but they certainly were not congruent to each other. Alright, that's our similarities and differences for a parallelogram and a quadrilateral.